Well, all the new baby chicks are out. That is a Cornish cross. You can see how massive these Cornish cross chickens get. There's another one around here somewhere. It's over there. They are massive. We have a bunch of babies. Went to family farm and home. I believe it was about maybe about a month and a half ago. Month. And picked up a whole bunch of babies. Look at that thing. Look how big it is compared to the others. Cornish crosses are meat birds, and they get very big very fast, and they're not supposed to live that long. Supposedly, they break their legs as they get older or have a heart attack. But we have a male that is coming up a year old and a female that's coming up on a year old, and while our male did lose a few of his toes because he didn't seem to want to stay in the haystack instead of on the concrete, they're both doing just fine. We call him Beefy, so I don't know if we're going to slaughter these two. It's weird to consider them as pets, but I've got this weird thing about pets of all kinds. There's Sage over there rummaging through a pile of ticks, I'm sure. Anyways, we are looking at the Farmall M with the loader. The loader is in the air, but there's a major problem. So I'll give you a up-to-date look at the tractor and what I've done. So this is the 12-volt hydraulic setup. This is the 20-quart V-Vor hydraulic setup. And what I've done is I moved the block that you see right there, that block right there, that two-way block. One controls the 3-point, one controls the front end loader. I moved it to the side over here on this rail. And of course, I got a few hoses. Hi, Sage. Are we guarding the flock today? She doesn't like the goats yet, but anyway. Ended up plumbing new hoses. The connectors, boy oh boy, I will say that Family Farm and Home wasn't exactly the most helpful when it came to getting adapters and so on for this, but I ended up going to a specialized hydraulic store and was able to get them there easily. But so anyway, this is the setup, and I removed the belt pulley drive and added a block-off plate. A little disappointed in the block-off plate. I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but the block-off plate holes were not aligned with these holes in the case. I didn't bother complaining. I just ended up drilling out the holes in the proper spot, but it was kind of annoying. But anyways, I recommend that you check, if you ever get a block-off plate for these, I recommend that you check its fitment before you go ahead and add a whole bunch of silicone or gasket maker, because, well, I didn't do that, and I had to drill after it was already settling with the Permatex High-Tack. So anyway, lesson learned. But I've just got this wood set up here for now. The whole thing likes to move when it's under pressure, so you'll see the whole thing kind of shift. So I didn't want it sitting on the metal case because I didn't want it to get all scratched up. So I have some furring strips underneath for now. I'm going to build something that's more of a kind of like a tray, kind of like what I did with the battery box here. I'm going to build a tray for it so that it can't move around. But basically, I've got a 2x3 and a furring strip here that is underneath the gas tank, and the gas tank is actually putting down pressure on this, which is holding this in place. I was bouncing all over the field with it, and it wasn't moving at all, so it just does not move. So it's good and solid right there. I'm very happy with that. Did all the wiring, obviously. It required a split, so I ended up using this 1/0 cable, and I split it in half from a 2/0 that runs straight to the battery. That way I've got positive power to the starter, positive power to the tree, and of course the ignition and so on, and then the negative I didn't split. I actually brought the negative. This is the negative of the 12-volt pump. Brought it just to the chassis, and then the chassis runs to the battery negative. So anyway, this is all set up. It's not pretty, but I don't care. It's functional. This is not a restoration quality tractor by any means. It is functional, and that's all I care about. It's function over, beauty, I guess. So I'll straighten all this up. I'll get this all looking beautiful. I'll do all this, that, and the other thing with it. And I really don't like... I have to do something about this. I really don't like that water and so on can get down into here. I'll probably add some silicone in there to keep the elements out, but I don't like that. That's the only complaint I have about this particular setup. But it takes almost 5 gallons of hydraulic fluid, and it is, I think, 2,000 or 2,500 psi. It is roughly 5 times, maybe even 6 times more powerful than the belly pump. And I've learned the hard way. I should have been thinking, but I learned the hard way that here's our kitty out hunting. I learned the hard way that when you increase the hydraulic pressure by about 5 times, you're bound to break something. So with the belly pump, the front end loader did decent. But when it hit its limit, then it was usually the limit of the belly pump, and it would just stop. So if you're trying to lift up on something that's a little bit too heavy, it would just stop, which is fine. This thing does not just stop. It will throw all 2,500 psi at whatever, and it has no give whatsoever. It has no mercy on whatever you're doing. And I learned that the hard way. Now, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Obviously, the loader's in the air. It still goes up and down. But you might be looking at it like this and saying, well, that's kind of tilted. It's because it is. So the front end loader on this is made by IH, and it was designed for the M. I believe you could also put it on the H, but I don't think you could add one of these to the C. It would have to be a smaller one. But what they do is they have this diagonal brace here, this tube, very heavy duty tube that runs to the frame, and then that runs all the way up to this point right here, and then that is transferred down to the axles. So essentially, you guys are gonna get stepped on, you know that? Essentially, all of the weight of whatever you're lifting, all of that weight is transferred to, where am I at? Transferred to here, which is then transferred down to the axle. So anything that you're lifting, obviously the weight of everything is going to be on the front tires, but the lifting force and so on is going to be transferred to the rear axles, which is a good design. It really is. The problem is that when you more than quadruple your PSI, you have no idea when you're going to hit the actual limits of this structure, because this thing does not care where you've got your strength at. It's just going to plow through it. The belly pump would just stop or just wouldn't lift anymore. This doesn't care. It just completely would just keep on lifting. So I was out in the field and I was pulling up some awesome heavy duty bushes that needed to be pulled out, and this had no problem pulling them out. The problem was that I was looking at the right side when I was doing this and not the left side. And what ended up happening was, you see this bar that's running down here, this diagonal brace, I actually bent it inward, and it hit the gas tank. Didn't do any damage, but you can see where it hit right here in this area. It hit the gas tank. I was looking to my right to see what was going on, and I wasn't looking to my left. And without any bangs, without any pops, without any nothing, the support that's on this side, which you see is missing. I don't have one here. There's the 2 bolts for it. That support ended up bending inward. It actually failed right here, right about in this area where the gas tank is at. And if it wasn't for the gas tank, it probably would have just kept on going. But the gas tank ended up keeping it from going any further. But as soon as I looked over and I noticed what had happened, I'm thinking to myself, that's great. Well, at the same time, because it got bowed in, it shortened or tightened the distance between that point and that point, which meant that this whole thing here came forward. So I don't know if you can see that or not very well. I'm just about perfectly lined up. So you can see the right side there is nice and straight and standing up, but the left side is bent forward a little bit. So we were looking at where this thing is actually attached, and it's welded right here, which I don't even know if that was a good idea because you've got this pin that runs across here, and they welded it in one spot right here, which was strong enough to keep this bottom portion from moving, but the top portion was allowed to bend forward. So it actually bent right here, right where the weld is at. It actually bent forward. So the thing that I should have paid attention closer to, and I've been told that certain farmers like to push their equipment beyond its capabilities, so I'm guilty as charged. But this side here is braced with angle iron going all the way down, almost all the way down to the bottom of the shaft. It's braced with angle iron. The other side was not, and I should have noticed that. I should have been paying closer attention, because I would have waited until we could have braced the other side before I would have gone out and started using the new loader with the new hydraulics. These cylinders are massive, and they have absolutely no problem lifting any load that you can throw at it. They just don't. Add to the fact that they now have down pressure, which really, really is amazing. This new hydraulic setup had no problem bending this absolutely massive diagonal brace. Now, what I can tell, or my theory is here, if you look on the other side here, you might be able to see some flat spots. What I think happened is the previous however many owners back, they bent this on the belly pump, and they started to bend it maybe, and then they added this diagonal brace here for added support, which is awesome. But they didn't do it to the other side. So as I was lifting this massive, what are you eating? So as I was lifting this massive bush, and I got a great picture of it, when I was lifting it up, which I had no problem doing, all of the weakness was on this side. So it actually bowed this support inward because it wasn't braced like the other one, which is definitely a problem. So obviously, let's get the obvious out of the way. The elephant in the room is I was using this much more than it was designed to be used. That's a fact. I'm not going to dispute it. Anytime you modify any piece of equipment to go beyond its capabilities, there's a risk that it's going to break. And I just did not think that this was going to be so powerful that it would not care what I'm lifting out of the ground. It would do it even if it broke the loader in half. So, with that in mind, now I have learned a valuable lesson. But I have to keep a closer eye on this, because this hydraulic pump does not care. It is not going to stop running. It's just going to keep going. It will literally tear the tractor in half before it'll give up. That's just the way that it is. It's designed that way. It's an extremely powerful hydraulic motor for its size. Okay, I'm not saying it's gonna, be as much as a big, huge gasoline hydraulic engine, but for its size, it's a very, very powerful system. Much more so than what came out in 1939. This is a 1950M, but the hydraulics didn't change all that much over the years. So, my neighbor Matt. He's an awesome guy. He actually works at a place that has a shop, and I try not to count on other people, but there's just certain times when you have no choice. And he's got an M just like mine. He has a front end loader just like mine, but his is more stout, I should say. He has a PTO driven hydraulic pump that he uses, which I don't know how many PSI. I think he said it's about 1,000 PSI. He's actually considering going to one of these things, but now he's concerned that he might have to beef up his loader for it. But anyway, we've got Matt who's going to be working on it. He actually already did. I saw it. I went over there yesterday. So he has a press at work, and he was actually able to press out the diagonal support that was broke, and he welded a massive angle iron on the end of it, or going all the way down the angle iron. So he actually improved the strength of it, and there's only one thing left that we have to do, hopefully today. See that end down there? Well, when this came forward, it actually tilted that end point upward. So now it's not going to line up with this. At the same time, we have to bend this back in place so that the loader is going to be equal. So the problem is that this point here is now forward, which is pushing this forward more than the other side. So it's causing this side to sag more. The problem isn't so much the sag. The problem is that now this piston, you can see where it's now hitting this battery box. There was a good 1 inch of clearance between the battery box and this piston. There's no longer. If I were to drop this down now, it would land on here, because this end here is now being pushed this way. It's actually pushing inward because it's no longer supported at the pivot point right here. So we have to get this to pull back. So we have to pull this back another, it's 1.5 inches. We measured it. So it has this top portion has to come back 1.5 inches, which then should bring this out. You can see how it kind of, it'll come outward. It'll kind of come outward. That way it'll clear this battery box just fine like before. And we'll be able to get the diagonal brace attached again. After that, after we've fixed all that and everything's all lined up, we're going to be welding a piece of probably square or round stock from this side all the way over to that side, because it failed right about in this area here. And while I don't know that, any other spot would have failed, it just seems that this was the spot that wanted to fail. So we're going to brace it from side to side over here. Now, the disadvantage to that is I'm going to have trouble getting out my gas tank if I ever need to. The gas tank is going to be a little bit more difficult to get out, but I'm going to try to leave enough room. I'm going to try to bring it up enough where I'll still be able to get the gas tank out. I think that if I lift the gas tank out from the front and slide it out, it'll come out, but we'll find out. I mean, that's just the way it is. I don't imagine that I'm ever going to need to get the gas tank out, but you never know. So that's something that we're going to do, is brace that. Thirdly, or fourthly, or whatever we're up to, because this can go forward, what we're actually going to be doing is he has some really nice thick tube stock. And we're actually going to be welding, we're going to be welding to somewhere down here. We're going to actually weld probably down there to that bracket, but we're going to weld a piece of stock at an angle to add some strength so that there's tension coming back on this. That way when the weight of the load comes up and these things want to move forward, they'll be braced down here at the bottom for added strength. So not only do we have pushing force from the frame up here, but we also have pulling force from the axle to the same spot. So it should be more rigid and be able to handle those loads. Oh, geez. Perfect timing for Sage to go investigate this fence over here. She knows that this one is live, but apparently she didn't realize that this one is also live. So she took a nice bite on the nose, likely. That's the third time she's done that. Eventually she's going to learn that all of these lines are hot. But anyways, so that was a perfect timing to hear some dogs sound like they're dying. But she's only about, I think, 3 months old, so she's fine. It hurts. I know it hurts. That solar one that I had that's, I don't know, a couple joules or something, just tiny little thing. It's about a half a joule, actually. I got hit by that one when I was touching an insulator, and boy, oh boy, that hurt. I can only imagine our 120 mile with its, I don't know, 20 joules or whatever it puts out. I can only imagine what that feels like. I haven't touched it yet, but anyways, so we're going to strengthen this up. And then the 5th and 6th and 7th thing that I'm going to go after is this. I'm just not going to lift as much with it. I don't want to risk this thing coming apart on me or breaking somewhere else or whatever, so I'm just not going to lift as much with it. That's just the way that it is. It's nice and powerful. I love it, so I'm going to keep going with it. This is the battery box, by the way, that was welded together out of stainless. And like I said, it fits perfect. I'm going to get an actual purpose-built strap around this. I just put this here temporarily so that I could make sure that it was actually going to stay, and it does. It stays perfectly fine. So this is going to stay here, and it works great. It really does. It's not in the way of anything. And like I said, I got to tighten all this stuff down. Again, I was just testing it to make sure that the thing wouldn't just like bounce off, but it works great. It's mounted right to the frame. Holds this battery just fine. This is a much bigger battery than you would normally put in these tractors. But this is an AGM battery, which I really like. So yeah, now we just have to get this put back together, and we should be back out in the field. It's kind of frustrating because a lot of what I need to do right now, as far as farming goes, requires this tractor. That's all there is to it. I am going to be getting some new farm tires. These are really starting to show some wear. They're looking pretty checked. You know, there's a lot of, and that's to be expected with all this weight that's on the front. So I've got my eyes on some 7.5 by 16, 8 or 9 ply rated tires, farm tires, and some tubes. About $200 for the set for 2, and the tubes to go with it. So I got a tire shop down the road that will actually do it for a nominal fee, that will actually dismount and remount the tires for a nominal fee. So I'm happy about that, and that will bring the weight and the ply rating. I think these are 6 ply. If I'm not mistaken, they're 6 or maybe even 5. They're pretty small, so they weren't designed for this front end loader. So I'm going to be replacing those. Some concerns that have risen about the 3-point. Number one, the positives. It is a double acting 3-point, so it's got power up and down, which is nice. But some concerns have arisen about the 3-point, and I'm going to be testing it with a post hole digger, an auger, a 3-point auger. Is that the concern was risen that with a normal 3-point, when you got the PTO and you're digging a hole, it can actually pull the whole thing right down until it gets stuck. With this, I don't think that's possible because it's double acting, so it's going to hold pressure, and I can slowly bring it down as it's cutting through the dirt. I can slowly bring it down and control the speed of descent rather than using gravity and just let it go. So that might be useful for digging all the posts that we have to dig for the new fence that we're doing this summer. And I got a lot of posts to dig. And I like the idea of digging it with, I like the idea of a larger hole rather than a 6-inch hole. I like the idea of having a larger hole. That means more concrete to support it, and even a bigger post maybe. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to being able to actually use this for things like log splitting, which is going to be super handy. I still have to finish. I'm removing the Christmas tree hydraulics and going back to a standard hydraulic setup. These two lines here I'll reuse, and I'll just connect them down here to the belly pump. That's the pressure out, and then the rearward one is the pressure in, or the relief pressure. So I'll get rid of this. I just need to get the cap and so on to screw on there, the relief valve and so on, so I can do that. And then that'll give me the power up, gravity down hydraulics from the belly pump, which is, you chickens are gonna get stepped on, which is perfectly what I wanted. Another thing that I was looking at, I have a whole bunch of, not cats, but I have a whole bunch of tractor tires. So when we bought this, or not this one, but the other tractor, it came with six extra tires. Those there are clamp-on duals. I have 2 more that are up by the trailer in the back that are the same size as the other tractor. And I've been thinking about doing something like a dish in, dish out setup. The reason is because of the 3-point. It's not because I want to look cool, but the reason is because of the 3-point. It's so muddy and mucky around here, and so soft and so wet everywhere that is on this property, that if I'm going to be doing something like round bales, and I've got these round bales attached to this 3-point here, the likelihood in me sinking into the ground with all that weight is very high. So adding the duals on the rear will help spread that weight out so that it's less likely. And at the same time, having the larger wheels in the front should reduce my likelihood of sinking in the front. Not going to eliminate it by any means, but it will reduce the likelihood of me getting stuck. So what I'm going to do is, there's a guy that's it's about an hour drive from me. He's got some wheels and so on that he only wants $100 a piece for them. So I'm gonna get a couple of those wheels, and then what I'm gonna do is add the duals, because I've already got the tires. I just need to mount them. So after I've done that dish in, dish out kind of deal, then I should have the weight spread out more. The concern is that the further you go out on the axle, the more likely you're to break it. But I don't think that's going to be an issue too much. It's of course a risk, but it's spreading all the weight across the entire axle shaft, not just in one spot all the way to the outer edge. So I think it'll be perfectly fine. I'm not worried about it, but maybe I should be. I don't know. I wasn't worried about the loader, but obviously this is what happened. So it shouldn't be a problem. But as far as everything I've been reading, it's just to help me not get stuck or sink when I'm hauling, bales, these round bales. I need to make sure that I don't sink into the ground. So that's the whole point of duals anyway, so that you have more flotation, so that you spread your weight across more surface area. That's the whole point. So at any rate, that's down the road. That's not something I'm worried about right now. That's more of a fall and spring deal. When things are really wet and I still have to feed the goats and the cows and whatever else we got going on. So that'll be down the road kind of deal. But anyway, that's it for the tractor update. Yeah, it's frustrating to say the least to have this thing sitting here again, not moving again. It runs, but I got to fix this before I go any further. But I got a lot of field work to do, and I need this tractor to do it. So we're getting there. Anyway, there's my update on the M with the broken front end loader that hopefully will be back online here in the coming days. Thanks for watching, and take care.